Katerina Jakob watched the German soldiers flee. Streaming from the east, that's what she was seeing. Allied bombers flew above them. She thought they all might die, and then soon there was the silence of all the SS men. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Katerina Jakob saw red flags flapping in the breeze above the Russian tanks, and she fell upon her knees. And so many different voices in so many different tongues sang the most beautiful song that could ever have been sung. In German, Lithuanian, in Polish and in Dutch, a myriad of melodies has never had been such. In Russian and in Yiddish, Italian and French, emerging from the forests beneath the trench. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. When the sun rose the next morning, it was the 1st of May, and they all sang the Internationale. They all sang the Internationale. Völker hört die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht. Völker hört die Signale auf zum letzten Gefecht. Die Internationale erkämpft das Menschenrecht.
Hello and welcome to Revolutionary Socialist Review for June 22nd. No, I'm sorry, not June, July 22nd, 2021. This is Chris Driscoll, and along with me tonight is Rainer Shea, our co-host. I'm the other co-host. That makes two, that's co, I guess. So, Rainer, how have you been? What you been up to?
Yesterday, when I was at a city council meeting, Yamo and I, Yamo is my communist friend here, we went to the city council meeting, and the first thing we saw there was this weird guy with a German accent and a leather jacket with a black and yellow pin on it, and he said to us, "Are you guys ready to kick some ass?" That was all he said. Then he went into there and he made this hyperbolic anti-communist speech calling for Humboldt County, the city of Eureka, to approve to create some kind of anti-communist resolution standing in solidarity with Cuba's supposed liberation movement. It was pretty outrageous. How he was so friendly with us.
Yeah, you know, I read your account of that on Facebook this morning, but you did not say the part about his anti-Cuba, anti-communist resolution. That's pretty outrageous.
He proposed that they create a resolution. That was
so. Hopefully, that went down in flames.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. So what's Yamo attending to tonight?
Well, I saw that he was talking about a homophobic incident that happened in the town of Ferndale last month when St. Mark's Lutheran Church, I think that's what it's called, in Ferndale, Humboldt County, California, they put up a sign that saying, "Hurt by LGBT culture, come here for healing." And he asked that Ferndale declare that they don't support homophobia.
So what city is this, the city council of, that you're talking about?
I think he was at the, I don't know exactly what it's called, but apparently he was in Ferndale today, from what I understand.
Oh, so, but you went to the, what city council meeting did you go to?
Eureka.
To the Eureka, that's the big town. Just try to get my geography straight there for Humboldt County. Yeah, and then I saw somebody comment that you should run for city council. What do you think of that?
It sounds good.
I did that once. When I was still in the Socialist Workers Party way back, I don't know, like how many years ago was that? Like 80 years ago, 70, something like, no, not that far back. But I think I was 25 when I did that. So that would have been in the late 70s, I think. And I ran for city council in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And it was kind of fun because like I had this one lady, this real old lady, she ran up to me and she said, "Oh, the socialists are back. I'm so excited." She says, and then she told me this story about her father, who was a socialist in the 1930s. I imagine that he was in the Socialist Party, and that he had been elected to the city council of some city in California, I think it was. But she was real excited to see the socialists were back. And in the 70s, I mean, that was, it was a bit more unusual than it is now to see socialists running for office. But anyway, yeah. I mean, I personally, you know how I feel. I think that all electoralism is a total waste of our time, effort, money, energy, blah, blah, blah. But, other people got other points of view, so I'm not going to get into it. Anyway, here we are. We are actually taping this on the late night, about 9:03 I have, on July 21st, which is a Wednesday, but this will be published on July 22nd. Hopefully I'll get it all, get this video all shaped up and processed and edited and so forth by sometime tomorrow morning. So that gives you guys an idea, you listeners, you watchers, an idea of where we're at in the news cycle, so to speak. And some interesting stuff happening this week. We're going to start off with an article by Rainer Shea. And this article is entitled QAnon, American Fascism and Settler-Colonial Fears of Revolt. Take it away, Rainer.
The reason why QAnon has become so popular is because its launching pad is the settler-colonial empire, where the people who believe in the legitimacy of the colonial state are so eager to embrace whatever paranoid narrative comes their way, whether it's the Jews are infiltrating our institutions, or China created the virus, or Trump is the Messiah who's working to bring down a satanic pedophile ring. Millions seemingly have come to believe this theory, and lately it's been evolving into a more general paranoid, ultra-nationalist lunacy, where these politicians, these QAnon-aligned politicians, are putting forth theories about the Chinese Communist Party getting involved in U.S. politics, and spreading anti-Semitic stuff. The root of it is settler colonialism, and that's probably why Canada is apparently one of the top 5 countries where QAnon is most prevalent. And ominously, another country where it's most prevalent is Germany, which apparently has its own version of QAnon. So this is a global movement of paranoia and anti-Semitism, and that's tied in with the effort to blame China for COVID-19. And underneath all of this lunacy is a rising movement for the liberation of the colonized peoples from this empire that has shackled, enslaved, robbed these colonized nations for centuries. It's rising in Canada, in the United States, and seemingly the European imperialist countries like Germany are reacting to it in their own ways, as evidenced by the rise of QAnon there. It's all intertwined. It's all interrelated, and there's one Mint Press News writer that I quote in my article, who observes how the narratives behind QAnon about how there's supposedly this cabal that's infiltrating and destroying the nation is pretty integral to American settler psychology. It's been utilized for many decades by Christian conspiracy theorists, Christian end times prophets, by Fox News demagogues, and QAnon is a version of that's been modified for our era of increasing crisis.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem all that new to me, even though it is QAnon is new, because I haven't been around that long. But yeah, I've seen this same kind of phenomenon my entire life, and over the history that I've studied intensively, the history of America, especially the working class history of America and the labor history of America. And there's always been a minority. I think right now, I think it's a pretty small minority. I mean, I've got to say, I don't know a single person who believes what QAnon says, except for Donald Trump, and he said that he believes it, but I don't really know him. I just know of him a great deal. But I don't know a single person, and I know some really rabid Trumpsters, Trumpites, whatever you want to call them, Trump fire victims or whatever. My own 2 sisters, my younger sisters, are both what I would call fascists. And I mean, I don't use that in a hyperbolic, I'm not using hyperbole when I say that I consider them to be fascist. I've heard them constantly over the years saying stuff that Hitler would have said, that Mussolini definitely would have said. You know, a mixture and a combination of the two. Mussolini was far less racist than Hitler, of course. But both of those two people, my two younger sisters, phenomenally to me, are extreme racists. But even they, I've never really seen them quoting QAnon or, you know, acting as though they, and I think I even asked both of them at one time or another, and that they both said, well, they don't really believe that. That's just for, you know, a little bit too far out for them. I don't really believe that it's all that big a phenomenon, but it is a phenomenon, certainly. And, you know, this kind of following obviously false crackpot conspiracy hypotheses. I won't call it a conspiracy theory, because anyone who knows anything about the philosophy of science knows that a theory is a highly proved, highly confirmed, highly verified set of facts that all stick together well, that all explain that set of facts. That's what a theory is. So these are obviously not theories in any way, shape, or form. They're hypotheses. They're crackpot conspiracy hypotheses. And they've been around for, to my knowledge, at least for the last 100 years, probably more than 100 years. For the last century and 20 years, let's call it, or century and 21 years, they've been around. And a lot of working class people fall into that, although certainly nowhere near a majority, nowhere near even a significant minority of people ever fall for this nonsense. But I mean, there have been some real wackadoodle crackpot conspiracy hypotheses that a lot of people did fall for a while, like, for instance, the 9/11 conspiracy, you know, the 9/11 nuts, as I call them, which was obviously Looney Tunes. You know, these were US created, US manufactured terrorists, jihadi terrorists, who attacked America. There can be no doubt of that. The evidence is over fucking whelming. And yet these crackpot 9/11 nuts claim that it's not so. So, I mean, you know, even in this day and age, there have been some where they still didn't get a majority. There's never been a majority who believed in the 9/11 crackpot hypotheses. But they got to be a pretty substantial minority, like maybe 35% of the American public bought into this nonsense. But yeah, anyway, QAnon, American fascism, settler-colonial fears. This, you know, American fascism, that's what we really need to home in on, because that is what the capitalist ruling class is hoping for these days, to really drum up an authentic fascist movement in the United States, to support the fascist police state that they already have implemented. So that's my greatest fear. QAnon, I'm not quite sure even how that fits in. We'll see in the long run, I guess. That's the kind of thing that historians will have to mull over in decades to come, and hopefully we will have decades to come. So, number 2 on the list of topics for the night: investigating Fort Detrick, a question of U.S. a question the US must answer. And this is according to the Chinese foreign minister. And he was responding to the fact that 5 million people over 5 days, this just started like 5 days ago, literally. Over 5 days time, 5 million people signed a petition in China urging the World Health Organization to investigate the bioweapons laboratory at Fort Detrick, Maryland, not too far from where I was born in Rockville, Maryland. It's about maybe 20 to 30 miles north of where I was born. And they have some of the most deadliest biological, viral, and chemical, but mostly it's viral and biological weapons known to humankind. These are some sick fuckers. And I suspected, we talked about this back when Bob was still on the show, Bob Carson. I'm sure we've talked about it during the time that you were on the show too, Rainer, but we've talked about the extreme possibility, the real, almost to the point of likelihood, that COVID-19 is either something that was deliberately planted by the US military or escaped in a laboratory accident from this laboratory, Fort Detrick. And that is something that I've been called a crackpot nut over, but it really fits my knowledge of the ways that the American empire has used biological, chemical, and viral weapons against people for its entire lifetime as a country. Ask any Native American, they'll tell you. You know, the American ruling class and its military, its minions, its police are well known for this. So it just fits what I already suspected from the get-go about COVID-19. So anyway, there's an article in Global Times this morning, July 21st, 2021, Wednesday morning, about this, and they say investigating Fort Detrick is the call of people all over the world, including the Chinese people, and it is a question that the US must answer when it comes to COVID-19's origins. Chinese Foreign Ministry said on Wednesday, after nearly 5 million Chinese signed an open letter demanding the World Health Organization investigate the US Fort Detrick lab. In less than 5 days, nearly 5 million Chinese have signed the open letter. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhou Lijian said at Wednesday's media briefing. Zhou added that the rising numbers are a representation of anger of the Chinese people at the political manipulation by the US on COVID-19 origins. Zhou said the US should be transparent, take measures to thoroughly investigate the source of its own pandemic and the failure of its response to it. Those who failed should be held accountable. Fort Detrick and more than 200 American overseas biological labs must be investigated. A group of Chinese netizens drafted an open letter to ask the WHO to investigate the US Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases at Fort Detrick, Maryland. They entrusted the Global Times with posting the letter on its WeChat and Weibo platforms on Saturday to solicit public response. They said in the letter that to prevent the next epidemic, the WHO should pay special attention to labs that are conducting studies on dangerous viruses or even biochemical weapons. The open letter particularly noted that the Fort Detrick lab, which stores the most deadly and infectious viruses in the world, including Ebola, smallpox, SARS, MERS, and the novel coronavirus. The leak of any of them would cause severe danger to the world. So it seems as though finally, all this time later, the Chinese government is coming to the same conclusion that we came to early on in the first few months of 2020. China's finally coming to agree with us on this. Your thoughts, Rainer?
There have been conflicting narratives that have been put forth by various sources, some of them more trustworthy than others, about the origins of the virus, particularly in these last few months. A few months ago, I remember there was this media hype about supposedly there being some evidence somehow that this virus came from a Wuhan laboratory, but obviously this was BS. This intelligence report came from unnamed sources, as these kinds of reports usually do, and they did not have evidence to back their claims up. And now we see how apparently there's this effort from within China, both institutional and popular. It seems like this is a trend on the internet among Chinese people to point the finger at the United States. And it seems like they have a lot better case than these unnamed intelligence officials from the U.S. have. They have a lot better reason to point the finger at the other side than we do, because the United States is known for committing these types of atrocities, whereas China is not. And this was the point that we made right at the start of this, that the United States has used biological weapons against Korea, against Cuba, and biological weapons often in the form of deliberately proliferated diseases. And there's where it gets really interesting, because when you look up on Google, was COVID-19 man-made? The first thing that comes up on the surface is scientists have concluded that the virus could not have been man-made, that it could only have come from an animal. But we'll have to see if this turns out to be true in the end.
Yeah, and I've always thought that's a I don't know what the term is. That's a red herring. I mean, obviously these novel coronaviruses come from an animal, and they're thought to come from bats. That's not the issue at all, you dumb motherfuckers. Do you really think we're gonna fall for this shit? The issue is, have you taken that novel coronavirus and manipulated it and changed it in your evil laboratories with the intent on making it a biological weapon? So, you know, they use the ignorance of most people on these kind of issues to pull the wool over their eyes. Not pulling the wool over my eyes, but they use that. I mean, it's, yeah. And the Wuhan thing, we should also point out that the Chinese government welcomed the World Health Organization into China, where they had a 3-week investigation just at that laboratory. And they had other investigators investigating other possible sources of the outbreak in Wuhan, which was the first publicly acknowledged outbreak, but probably not the first outbreak. The first outbreak was probably in California and or in Italy or Spain. Those are the 3 major suspects, because those 3 areas had cases that look in every single way like COVID-19 prior to the outbreak in Wuhan. So, you know, more and more is coming out, just like we said on this show last year, Rainer. More and more is coming out, and we'll see where it leads. So anyway, the World Health Organization concluded decisively that the COVID-19 virus did not come from China's laboratory based in Wuhan that investigates viral diseases. So there you have it. Anyway, next on the list, let's see where we are here. Imperialists unleash desperate warfare against Latin America. Rainer Shea, take it away.
This attempted color revolution in Cuba is indicative of something much bigger, because apparently the president of Cuba has accused these protesters of being instigated by US-financed mercenaries, which would make total sense, because mercenaries have been taking on a growing role within US imperialist machinations in Latin America and the globe more broadly. There have been these mercenaries getting in on the efforts to repress the working class and the poor throughout the US neo-colonies in Latin America. And recently there was this this crazy incident of Colombian mercenaries assassinating the dictator of Haiti because he had become very unpopular and he had become an inconvenient servant for the US empire. And now Biden is exploiting the instability from this assassination to create a pretext for intervening in Haiti and occupying Haiti in partnership with many of the right-wing regimes Washington is aligned with throughout the region. This correlates with the recent efforts by Bolsonaro and Fujimori in Peru to stoke fears of supposed leftist election fraud to try to destroy democracy within these countries. Fujimori has claimed that Pedro Castillo, the socialist, has stolen the election and that the election is legitimate. So this is no doubt going to create the narrative precedent for further CIA subversion efforts within Peru as Pedro Castillo tries to proceed with his presidency. And Bolsonaro, that's a pretty interesting and precarious and alarming story, because next year is the election in Brazil, and it's probably going to be Bolsonaro versus Lula da Silva. And it's possible that Bolsonaro is going to have the CIA grant him his own personal Capitol Hill riot, his own personal coup for if Lula wins, so that Bolsonaro can hold on to power, so that the hard right can hold on to power in Brazil. Alternatively, though, maybe the U.S. empire will let Lula win, so that they can try to co-opt him towards serving their military occupation and intervention goals within Haiti. Because let's not forget that Lula, despite being better than Bolsonaro, pretty much any politician is better than Bolsonaro. Lula, when he was president, he carried water for the US empire by sending Brazilian forces to militarily occupy Haiti. And this also created the instruments for increased repression against the colonized peoples within Brazil. So we're going to see how good of an anti-imperialist Lula is really going to be should he win. And as for Bolivia, it's clear that the imperialists are slowly trying to build back up their narrative pretext for intervening within Bolivia. It was revealed recently that last fall, these officials within Bolivia's coup regime were plotting to overturn the election results to carry out a second coup, and that's obviously failed. So maybe mercenaries is going to be the route that the imperialists take in Bolivia. In the meantime, the imperialists are slowly trying to inculcate Americans with the idea that the new socialist government within Bolivia is weaponizing the courts, that it's violating the rights of these murderous torturers, these anti-democratic leaders within the Bolivian coup regime.
Yeah, that, you know, the evil side of the picture, they always come out whenever we, the working class, are having great victories, and we've certainly had some great victories in Latin America, especially in the northern part of South America over the last year. And you know, I mean, we've seen, we're seeing Lula, as you mentioned. We're seeing the socialist candidate in Peru for the presidential election, who won the presidential election 3 weeks ago, but it was just declared here in the last couple of days by the authorities in the election commission that he did in fact win the election. And then of course there's the story in Bolivia where the people, after a year of a fascist coup d'etat that overthrew Evo Morales, has the people won a great victory against the fascists, and have brought another socialist to the presidency. Yeah, none of these people are really revolutionary, you know, real revolutionary socialists. I mean, Lula certainly not. Lula's always been pretty much a social democrat. Also with what's her name, Vilma, I can never remember her last name, Vilma Desoff, or I can't remember her last name, but the person who succeeded Lula as the president of Bolivia before Bolsonaro.
Brazil.
Pardon me?
Brazil.
In Brazil,
Oh.
yeah, I'm sorry, in Brazil, yes. So there have been victories. I mean, you know, people in El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Venezuela are holding their own against obvious attempts at color revolution, mercenary invasions, Yeah, and it seems as though Biden, even more than his predecessor, um, is depending on mercenaries more and more to do the American empire's dirty work. So anyway, let's see, where are we at? The next point, topic number 4, the Bay of Tweets. Documents point to U.S. hand in Cuba protests. An article in Mint Press News that was published on July 21st, 2021. And it's by Alan MacLeod. And Alan is someone that we have mentioned several times previously. Great writer, in my opinion. Anyway, he's he's writing from Havana, Cuba. He says, Cuba was rocked by a series of anti-government street protests last week. The U.S. establishment immediately hailed the events, putting its full weight behind the protesters. Yet documents suggest that Washington might be more involved in the events than it cares to publicly divulge. And this is pretty much the same thing as our great guests last week. Gabriel Rockhill mentioned that there are these that there's evidence coming out of Americans once again interfering in another country with the supposedly a sovereign country, although we all know that Haiti has been effectively a de facto colony of the American empire for a long time, for decades and decades and decades. Anyway, MacLeod goes on saying, as many have reported, the protests, which started on Sunday, that's Sunday a week ago Sunday, so it's like a week and a half ago, in the town of San Antonio de los Baños in the west of the island, were led and vocally supported by artists and musicians, particularly from its vibrant hip-hop scene. But what these accounts did not mention was the remarkable extent to which Cuban rappers like Yo Tool have been recruited by the American government in order to sow discontent in the Caribbean island. The latest grant publications of the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, an organization established by the Reagan administration as a front group for the CIA, show that Washington is trying to infiltrate the Cuban arts scene in order to bring about regime change. Quote, a lot of what we do today was done covertly 25 years ago by the CIA, NED co-founder Alan Weinstein once told the Washington Post. I've heard that quote many a time. It's an astounding quote that this putrid imperialist pig actually admitted that the NED is basically just a cultural front group for the CIA. One project entitled Empowering Cuban Hip Hop Artists as Leaders in Society states that its goal is to promote citizen participation and social change and to raise awareness about the role hip hop artists have in strengthening democracy in the region. Another, called Promoting Freedom of Expression in Cuba through the Arts, claims it is helping local artists on projects related to democracy, human rights, and historical memory, and to help increase awareness about Cuban reality. That's the same reality that Biden was talking about last week, which is not reality. Fake reality. When Biden was talking about Cuba. Lies, in other words, CIA, State Department lies. Other operations the NED is currently funding include enhancing Cuban civil society's ability to propose political alternatives, to transition to democracy. The agency never divulges with whom it works outside Cuba, nor any more information beyond a couple of anodyne blurbs, leaving Cubans to wonder whether any group even vaguely challenging political or societal norms is secretly bankrolled by Washington. The State Department, the U.S. Agency for International Development, and the U.S. Agency for Global Media have all financed programs to support Cuban artists, journalists, bloggers, and musicians. Tracy Eaton, a journalist who runs the Cuba Money Project, told Mint Press. It's impossible to say how many U.S. tax dollars have gone toward these programs over the years because details of many projects are kept secret, he added. A currently active grant offered from NED's sister organization, the USAID, is offering $2 million worth of funding to groups that use culture to bring about social change in Cuba. The House Appropriations budget, published earlier this month, also sets aside up to $20 million for democracy programs in Cuba, including those that support free enterprise and private business organizations. Now, these are just some highlights from the article by Alan MacLeod. MacLeod is just repeating the language that these documents, these U.S. government documents, actually use when they're justifying or supporting the expenditure of huge amounts of money on these programs. However, we know from our own experience that behind these pretty words is some pretty ugly terrorism. We know that they use the same kind of pretty words when they were supporting democracy in Ukraine, for example. And we got a lot of information because there were some major leaks, thanks to WikiLeaks, of what really went on when the American empire spent $5 billion of your tax dollars to engineer the bloody, vicious, fascistic coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014. We know their real MO, and it's not promoting democracy. It's not, funding groups that use culture to bring about social change. This is pure bullshit. It's lies. What we know is that these color revolutions and preparations for invasions, that they're terrorist acts against sovereign countries. These really are sovereign countries, even though the American empire does not treat them like sovereign countries. So Rainer, what are your thoughts? Cuba and the latest American color revolution attempt.
One of the arguments that I've used for why somebody who is anti-capitalist should be a Marxist-Leninist is that a Marxist-Leninist state is a lot harder to overthrow than a social democratic anti-imperialist state. It's not likely that the Bolivia coup would have happened if Bolivia had been a worker state as opposed to a capitalist state where socialist had won, though the conditions made it kind of unavoidable that Morales had to gain power through electoral means. But an example, the elephant in the room, I think, that shows how even a worker state can be defeated is the fall of the Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc. I think we should take responsibility, like historical responsibility, for the mistakes that were made in the project to defend the Soviet Union from imperialist subversion. Because as I think it was Kim Jong-il said, the reason why the USSR fell was because the USSR's leadership abandoned the state as an instrument for class struggle. It became revisionist. As a consequence, socialism could not be defended within the Soviet Union. And the way that Xi Jinping put it was essentially a mentality of historical nihilism was embraced within the ranks of party leaders. They repudiated Stalin and Lenin. This happened during the Khrushchev era, where they published these awful lies, slanders about Stalin to create a narrative pretext for doing all these concessions to the imperialists and abandoning the state as an instrument for class struggle, as Kim put it. So these are the pitfalls that states like Cuba will need to avoid if they want to prevent themselves from being overthrown as the Soviet Union was. And there are some who argue today that Cuba, Vietnam, Laos, especially China, and the DPRK, all these existing socialist countries, have fallen into that revisionist path. But there's a difference, I think, between the mistakes the Soviet Union made and whatever mistakes, if there's any you can point to, that the leaderships of these countries have been making. And I think that if global communists can learn from the mistakes of the Soviet Union, we can be in a much better position to stop the imperialists from carrying out counter-revolution ever again.
Yeah, I always say Gorbachev opened the floodgates to imperialist termites, and he allowed the imperialist termites into the Soviet Union, and the rest is history. He opened the floodgates. That in a nutshell. I don't really think that anything that Khrushchev did greatly opened the Soviet Union to the kind of just open policy. Fuck, Gorbachev called it openness, you know. You can argue with what Khrushchev did, with whether it was the right thing. However, the Soviet Union in the 1960s and 70s, and even through the early part of the 1980s, was a very strong socialist workers' state that no imperialist power could threaten. Not until Gorbachev came and opened the floodgates did that happen. And even then, there were forces within the Communist Party that were still true to real Marxism-Leninism, who fought tooth and nail to save their country. Unfortunately, by then it was too late. But yes, we do need to learn these lessons. We need to apply them. Next on the list, Gaza, a vision of what capital and empire intend for the globe. And Rainer, that's one of your articles, and there's another one following that. We're going to be in Afghanistan for the next half century. And I'm going to step away here for just a minute. So just launch into those two. Hopefully I'll be back in plenty of time to discuss it.
In the first article, I described how the war on terror and U.S. policy towards Latin America, both of them are essentially larger versions of the colonial war that the Zionists have been waging against the Palestinian people. As was described by I think he was an Iraqi professor in 2004, the things that the imperialists did in Iraq following the invasion and occupation were exactly the same as what the Israelis were doing in Palestine. There were people getting wantonly shot and killed. There was so much unaccountable mass murder against these people. And this mass murder has continued in Iraq and other places like Afghanistan since then. As was described in a recent video by Abby Martin, the CIA has orchestrated numerous death squads throughout Afghanistan, where these jackboots have executed entire families, burnt down homes, including homes with children in it. So there's this horrific campaign to terrorize the masses within Southeast Asia, within these countries that the so-called war on terror is occupying. And this is paralleled in Latin America, where the imperialists are engineering the conditions that have been forcing all of these indigenous people within the southern part of the Americas to try to flee for the wealthier imperialist countries. Just like how Israel engineers Gaza's economic deprivation and starvation and water shortages through a blockade, the imperialists are consistently supporting neoliberal austerity policies, privatization, wage cuts that drive down living standards throughout Latin America. And lately, the impacts of these neoliberal policies have been showing themselves in the really dire danger that Latin America's largest urban areas have been coming under from the droughts there. And when a lot of these migrants try to flee for the United States repays them by shoving them into notoriously inhumane detention centers where people have been gassed, forcibly sterilized, tortured in all of these ways, where people have been subjected to diseases like COVID-19. And alternatively, the US has been putting them under psychologically abusive surveillance through ankle monitors. This is the Biden administration's supposedly more humane alternative to mass detention. And I think in both cases, the prison industrial complex has been benefiting from this abuse of migrants. The prison industrial complex, actually the Israeli network of tech firms has been benefiting from the U.S. war on migrants. I'm talking about how the Israeli tech firm Elbit has been hired to build a virtual wall along the U.S. southern border, where they've built all of these surveillance towers that can intensively monitor all of these surrounding areas. And there's one indigenous community that these towers monitor that's been unable to practice its cultural practices because these hostile white ICE agents have been No, I think it's U.S. Customs and Border Protections agents have been monitoring them. There's a real creep factor there, and there's this virtual wall that they've built in recent years along the U.S. southern border that detects these desperate migrants the moment they try to get into the United States, and something similar happens in Gaza. So there are all of these parallels between what the Zionists are doing in Palestine and what the imperialists are doing more broadly, whether in Southwest Asia or in Latin America. And my second article titled, "We're going to be in Afghanistan for the next half century," quotes, I think his name was ex-colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, who gave a speech at the Ron Paul Institute where he was describing how Washington intends to stay in Afghanistan for several decades more because this serves their strategic interests, because Washington intends to try to counter China well into the 21st century, into the rest of the 21st century, by keeping Afghanistan unstable deliberately, by sabotaging China's Belt and Road Initiative, also by instigating Uyghur separatist terrorism that the imperialists hope will spill across the Afghanistan-China border and reignite the violence within Xinjiang, which has no longer existed for the last few years, but the imperialists hope every day that through their Xinjiang genocide propaganda, through their support for Uyghur terrorists within Afghanistan, the terrorism paradigm is going to come back to China.
Yeah. Wow, it's frightening what these evil people will do, and they certainly do this kind of evil. This is just incredible to me. In both of those last two articles that you went over, the Zionist state, the evil fascist Zionist state, has been a test bed. You know, I guess that General Alexander Haig, when he said that it, quote, Israel is a U.S. aircraft carrier based on land in well, what he was talking about was in Palestine. You know, I guess it's more than that now. It's also, for the last several years, been a real test bed for plans that America has for the whole world and even for American citizens, for people in this country and in what has been called America, even though who knows how in fuck it got that name, because you know, Amerigo Vespucci, yeah, he made some fucking map. It wasn't even the first map of America. So they named the whole you know, hemisphere, 2 continents after him. It's kind of strange to begin with, but yeah, whatever you want to call America, it is, you know, we're in for a world of hate and a world of hurt because of what these evil fucks do. And they're doing it right now to China. They're hoping to do it to China. China's a very strong, China, in my opinion, is the strongest country in the world. You know, in some ways, they're not strong enough yet militarily. They're lucky that they have such a strong partnership with the Russian Federation, because the Russian Federation's obviously in advance of China and certainly in advance of America when it comes to advanced electronics and applying that to weaponry, to the most advanced weaponry in the world. And so China has that to back it up also. So I'm not that worried about it, although it is irksome because these are just like little, mosquito bites, pinpricks that they're constantly poking the dragon. I don't know if you recall a couple of weeks back, our show was titled "Don't Poke the Dragon," and that's exactly what these insane, evil, capitalist, imperialist masters of the American empire are attempting to do. They're old and decrepit. They're dying off. Their empire is slowly crumbling. And yet they'll spend money on this kind of nonsense. Keeping what is already America's longest war, keeping it going even farther through another lie. And of course, pedophile Joe Biden is great at the lies. He's been doing it for his entire, 45, 47, 48 year political career. He's been pumping these lies, supporting the capitalist class and the capitalists and the American empire. Yeah, it's really troubling. But I have no doubt and all the confidence in the world that we will win, that we, the global working class, will win, that our greatest vanguards, the vanguard in China, for instance, the vanguard guards in Vietnam and Cuba and in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, that they will lead this victory of the global working class, that we will win against imperialism. On the other hand, we have no choice. We have to win against imperialism because imperialism is crumbling fast, it's falling fast, and it's trying to take us all with it. It is dying and it's trying to kill off the entirety of humanity. So we really have no choice in this matter. We must defeat imperialism. Anyway, final on our list tonight, Disinformation Empire says it's fighting disinformation. Caitlin Johnston, Consortium News, July 21st, 2021. Now, we've mentioned articles by Caitlin Johnston numerous times over the years. She is a pretty amazing woman. I don't always agree with her, but I definitely agree with her on this one. And just to give you a few highlights of the article, she says, the weirdest thing about the Biden administration tasking itself with the censorship of disinformation on social media is that the United States is the hub of a globe spanning empire that is built upon a foundation of disinformation, maintained by disinformation, and facilitated by disinformation. If the propaganda engine of the US centralized empire ceased actively deceiving the public about the world, it would collapse immediately. There would be mass unrest at home and abroad. Status quo politics would be abandoned. Alliances and coalitions would crumble. Leaders, official and unofficial, would be ousted, and US unipolar hegemony would end. The only thing keeping this from happening is the vast amounts of wealth and energy which are poured into continuously deceiving the people of America and its allies about what's really going on in their nations and political systems and in the world as a whole. The aim is getting people to believe they live in separate sovereign nations which function independently from one another instead of member states within a single undeclared empire which moves as one unit on the international stage. That's number one. Number two, getting people to believe they control the fate of their nation via the democratic process, when in reality, all large-scale politics are scripted puppet shows controlled by a plutocratic class who owns both the politicians and the media outlets which report on them. Getting people to believe they are part of a virtuous, rules-based international order, which opposes totalitarian regimes to spread freedom and democracy, instead of a tyrannical empire that works to destroy any nation which disobeys its dictates. And above all, manufacturing the illusion that the oppressive, exploitative, imperialist status quo is normal. Rainer?
Well, I think it's also important to name a bunch of examples of disinformation. Just to back this up, examples like the Organization of American States claiming falsely, this was totally debunked, that Evo Morales's party perpetrated election fraud in the 2019 presidential election in Bolivia. This was totally proven false, and it was the entire justification for the ouster of Evo. There's also the constant disinformation put out about North Korea. The YouTuber Hakeem recently did a video sarcastically asking, why is North Korea so weird? Where he exposed all of these absurd South Korean tabloid claims about North Korea that get regurgitated by the global capitalist media. Claims like, North Korea says that it's discovered a unicorn. Men in North Korea are forbidden from getting Kim Jong-un's haircut. Also, men in North Korea are mandated to have Kim Jong-un's haircut. Nonsense like that. There's also what I mentioned about China supposedly creating the virus in a lab. There's no real basis for this claim. Last year, it was Russia has been paying Taliban members bounties to assassinate U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. This is totally debunked. There have also in recent years been multiple lies with the complicity of the Organization for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons about how Assad has supposedly committed these chemical attacks in Syria. These have been debunked too. It goes on and on.
On and on and on. We could sit here all day just remembering examples of how claims by the American billionaire-owned news media, not mainstream in any way, comes up with this garbage, and we could come up with very clear examples of how this garbage is fed to them, like pablum to a baby, by the CIA and by the State Department and by the Pentagon, by the Office of the White House. It's just astounding, just astounding. Yeah, Caitlin could have come up with numerous examples. The article's still pretty good. I just read you some highlights. We will have, for that and for all the other articles that we reviewed tonight, we will have links in the description under this video when it goes up. So with that, we're at an end. Rainer, anything final that you want to add before we go?
Oh, let's see. The epilogue to that incident in the city council meeting was me and a couple of my friends made comments to counter the comments from the several rightists who had commented that they want the city council to stand in solidarity with Cuba Libre. We talked about how the U.S. police state, particularly in our area, has been violating the rights of the people. And Yamo talked about how his people have been occupied for hundreds of years by the illegitimate U.S. settler-colonial state. And Yamo even said, "Long live Che, long live Castro."
Really? Great comments. Hopefully it got through to some people, although that's obviously not your target audience there. But who knows, maybe you'll get picked up by some media. I used to have to do that when I was when I was first a reporter. I had to do that kind of garbage, go to county council meetings and city council meetings and university what do they call that shit, the people that run the university system, the I can't remember the word they use for that kind of board of directors, but anyway, it's incredibly boring stuff. So better you than me. I will never go to a city council meeting again in my life. I will never go to a county council meeting again in my life. I did it for a long time. Anyway, that's that. That's the news. That's the Marxist-Leninist view and review of the news. So until next week, first of all, thank you, Rainer, for all of your enormous, prolific contributions to the show. And thank all the viewers, thank all the listeners. And please, please, please come back next week. Until then, I bid you a sweet adieu.